Good evening. Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. As you can see, the president is speaking at a rally in Pennsylvania live. We're going to listen in, and we'll come back when he's done.
And I had Obamacare done, except one guy at 2 o'clock in the morning went in and said, he went thumbs down. Even though he campaigned for years, repeal and replace. All right. But we've done a number on Obamacare. We're coming out with tremendous health care plans. We've gotten rid of the individual mandate, the most unpopular thing probably in our country. Gone. Gone. No individual mandate. Where you have the privilege to pay a fortune as a penalty in order not to pay a fortune for bad health care. Think of that. Is that a good thing? I don't think so. We got rid of it. It's gone. You know how many people have come up to me and said, thank you very much for getting rid of the individual mandate. Sounds so nice. Isn't it a beautiful term? The individual mandate is wonderful. See, I'm acting presidential now. The individual mandate. The individual mandate is a disaster. It sounds good. Like the Affordable Care Act was not affordable. Remember when Bill Clinton got up? He said the problem with the Affordable Care Act is that it's not affordable. And then you didn't hear from him for 2 weeks because he got the hell knocked out of him by crooked Hillary. For 2 weeks, he went dead silent. They wouldn't let him out of the house. The women's unemployment rate, I'm sorry, women, damn it, is the lowest in only 65 years. Not history. Sorry, but it'll be low soon. It'll be, so it's 65 years. 65 years, but I would almost bet within 2 weeks or the next time this incredible statistical group is relaxed and released, I would say that probably the women will be historic also, right? Right? I think so. But at 65 years, I'm doing my best. 52%. Oh, the women liked me, you know? They liked me. They liked me. I keep hearing about, look at all those signs, the pink signs with the women. Look at that. Look at it. The women have been great. And I think they are incredible. They have a harder job than all of us, fellas, let me tell you. The women are great. And we did great with the women. In fact, I remember again on election night, they said, how the hell did this happen? Remember, they were giving you phony numbers on that too. The veterans' unemployment rate has reached the lowest level in 18 years, and that's going to go up forever. More than 3.5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps. More than 4 million Americans are going to receive job training under our new workforce initiative. Manufacturing, consumer, and business confidence has reached the highest level in the history of our country. I'd say that's pretty good. Confidence is a good thing. Having confidence, what do you think? Having confidence is good, right? If you have confidence and you know what you're doing, you can't lose. That's a great stat. Think of it. Essentially, business, the most confident in our country. It's great. The United States is now a net natural gas exporter for the first time in more than 60 years, and Pennsylvania workers are leading the way. You're leading the way. I don't know if you even know that. Now that we have the best economy in the history of our country, this is the time to straighten out the worst trade deals ever made by any country on earth at any time. For generations, Pennsylvania steel and Pennsylvania coal made this state the center of the industrial world. The workers of Scranton and Bethlehem and Allentown and Wilkes-Barre were the backbone of American might. They really were the backbone of our country, the backbone of American strength and might. But the loyalty of our workers was repaid with betrayal. You were betrayed by our politicians. You were betrayed by the people that ran our country, but you're not betrayed anymore. Pennsylvania lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs, and China joined the WTO. Right now, China's not too happy with me. But I have great respect for President Xi, and I have great respect for China. It's not their fault that our leaders were stupid. For decades, our politicians ran for office, pledging to crack down on unfair trade, but they never did it. But once elected, they did absolutely nothing, and our workers and our country got ripped off like no country ever before in the history of the world. We got ripped off. It was a massive, massive transfer of wealth to other countries. The politicians just watched as other countries stole our jobs, plundered our wealth, and looted the crown jewels of the American economy. But I am not another politician. I keep my promises to the people. I didn't need this. I didn't need this. I didn't need it. I had a very nice life. I didn't need to be, I used to get actually good press. I didn't need this. But I love it. I love it because we're doing things that are historic. There has never been, and even these people back here, these horrible, horrendous people, even these people back there, look at it. It looks like the Academy Awards. There's so many. You ever see this? Is this the Academy Awards you're doing? Even these people, they say, probably in the history of this country, maybe in the history of the world, there has never been anything like what happened in November of 16. Probably never. Probably never happened. Probably never happened. I really believe there's never been. I remember watching one, and we were starting to do really well. And that last 2 weeks, I had crowds like this everywhere. We had thousands of people outside. They couldn't get in. I said, so why are we going to lose? Hillary would come in. She'd have 350 people. She'd bring in Beyonce. And then Jay-Z would get up and he'd use language that was so bad. If I ever used that language, I'd be run out of the country. They say Trump's language is very tough. Did you ever hear Jay-Z? And she'd bring in Bruce Springsteen. And they'd draw crowds. They were drawing crowds smaller than my crowds. And I said, why are we going to lose? And you know what? We didn't. But what happened was interesting because they started off by saying, we haven't seen anything like this since Ronald Reagan. I like Ronald Reagan. And then it got bigger and bigger and wilder and wilder. And then we won by a lot. Don't forget, it was 306 to 223. That's a lot. Remember? There is no way, according to fake news CNN, there is no way for Trump to get to 270. You had to get to 270. There is no path. Remember the expression? Ladies and gentlemen, there is no path for Donald Trump to get to 270. No, there wasn't, but 306 was no problem. So after years of rebuilding other countries, we are finally rebuilding our country. In the numbers that were just released, The reporters didn't cover this one. To me, it was maybe more important than the 4.1 because we're going to be doing a lot better than 4.1 as things go. For the first time, maybe ever, the trade deficit just fell, think of that, for the quarter, $52 billion. Nobody reports it. Why don't you report that? Just fell by $52 billion. And because of our economic planning and our charging taxes or tariffs to all of the dumpers of steel all over our country, America's steel mills are roaring again. Our country is being respected again because we are finally putting America first. We've eliminated a record number of job-crushing regulations. I withdrew the United States from the unfair and very, very expensive for our country Paris Climate Accord. So unfair. That was another great ripoff. Republicans just passed the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country. And the Democrats want to lift them way up. Remember that. When you go to vote, they want to end your tax cuts and they want to lift it up so they can waste your money on a lot of nonsense. And very importantly, we saved our family farms and our small businesses from the estate tax, also known as the death tax. No longer the death tax. No longer will they pay the estate tax. Our family farmers. The individual mandate's gone. The penalty is gone through association health plans. You know that. The association health plans are giving us and allowing Americans to join forces to buy much better health care for a fraction of the cost, and you can go cross state lines and negotiate with everybody you want to negotiate with. We've invested a record $700 billion in our military and $716 billion next year. We're rebuilding our military with the finest planes, the finest missiles, the finest ships anywhere in the world. We had to do it. We had to do it. And they're all made in the USA, folks, called jobs too. In that case, much less important, because there's nothing so important as protection on our military. But in this case, only time it's secondarily, it's called jobs, because all of this equipment and all of these brilliant planes that everybody else, they want to buy, all of them. We have a backlog. We make the greatest military equipment in the world. We make the greatest jets. We make the greatest ships. We make the greatest missiles. We have the anti-missile missiles that shoot down missiles many, many miles away in the sky like a needle in a haystack. They shoot them down. Hard to believe. And we're surrounding our country with them, by the way, if you don't mind. Remember when other countries said, we don't want you to put defensive missions and missiles in your country. You don't want us to put explain that to me, please. Remember? They used to get angry when we would put defensive missiles, anti-missile missiles in our country. And so we wouldn't do it. No thanks. We'll put them in, if you don't mind. And I've directed the Pentagon to begin the process of creating a sixth branch of the United States Armed Forces called the Space Force. Very important. We just passed the landmark VA accountability law. Now, if a bad government worker mistreats or neglects or steals does anything bad to our great veterans, we turn to them and we say, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. Got to do it. Got to do it. Maybe most importantly, that was 40 years they tried to get accountability. But even more, I wanted veterans' choice, where if a veteran isn't properly served, if they have to wait 3, 4, 5 weeks, can you imagine yourselves? The doctor says, oh, that's okay, come back in 22 days. People that were not ill end up being terminally ill because they can't see a doctor. So we passed, they've been trying to pass it for 40 years. We just passed, I signed it a month ago, Veterans' Choice, where a veteran, our great veterans, if they have to wait for a long period, they go outside, they go to a private doctor, and we pay the bill. Right? I withdrew the United States from the horrible and very expensive, and a deal that didn't work, the Iran nuclear deal. And I hope everything's going to be fine with us in Iran, but I will tell you, they are a much different country than they were 4 months ago. I also recognize the capital of Israel, and 5 months later, we opened the American Embassy in Jerusalem. Instead of apologizing for America, we are standing up, and we love our country, and we're saying we have a great country. We don't apologize anymore. We're standing up for the heroes who defend America, and we're proudly standing up for our national anthem. With every promise we keep, every record we break, and every factory we open, we are restoring American strength, and we are restoring American pride. But to continue this incredible movement, we must elect more Republicans so we can get the votes that we need to pass these incredible programs. And most importantly, get your friends, get your neighbors, and get out and vote for an incredible champion, an incredible winner, Lou Barletta. Loyal citizens like you help build this country. And together we are taking back our country. We're returning power to where it belongs, to the American people. This is the state where our founding fathers declared our independence, signed our Constitution, and defended our God-given rights. Proud Pennsylvania workers mined the coal, worked the railroads, and forged the steel that made America into the greatest and most powerful nation in the history of our world. And now it's more powerful and richer than ever before, and it's only going to get better. From Valley Forge to Gettysburg to Normandy, Pennsylvania patriots gave their sweat, their blood, and their very lives to protect our families, our freedom, and our great American flag. We stand on the shoulders of these American patriots who knew how to work, knew how to fight, and knew how to win. They knew how to win. With your help, your voice, and your vote, we are going to keep on fighting, and we are going to keep on winning. We are going to win so much, perhaps some of you, but not all, will get tired of winning. Anybody going to get tired of winning? We will never give up. We will never give in. We will never back down. And we will never stop fighting for this land that we love. Because we are Americans, and our hearts bleed red, white, and blue. We are one people. Democrats, anything I want, and it's not even the Republicans. I don't know if they care about the Republicans. They care about me. They're very concerned. Anything I want, they want to oppose. You know, I just figured out how to do the wall. I'll say, I don't want to build a wall, and they'll insist on building it.
Jeanine Pirro was watching the rally closely and assessing it. She's the host, obviously, of Justice with Judge Jeanine. She's the author of a new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, and we're happy to have her on the show tonight. Judge, what do you think of it?
Well, I thought it was vintage Donald Trump. I think that he gets energy from the audience. They get energy from him. He was everything. He was entertaining. He was positive. He was funny. But more importantly, he had a message of success that energized Pennsylvania. And I love the way he talked about American history and Pennsylvania and the role that they played, the steel mills and railroads. And you know, my own dad was from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and veterans. I mean, it was all good stuff, and that audience loves him, and he will do this constantly until the 2018 elections.
So you've talked to the president. I have to ask, because we have a lot of his rallies during our show, so I listened to all of them. And toward the end, he always mentions Space Force. Yeah. And I've never really heard it discussed anywhere but at his rallies. When you talk to him, do you sense this is something close to his heart?
Yes, and I want to talk to him more about Space Force, and maybe we'll be able to get some more information. But clearly, this is a man who is not satisfied with just getting, you know, better unemployment, although he's going to work for lower women's unemployment, which I thought was kind of interesting, and all of the positive things. He's thinking about the future, not just now. But that is classic Donald Trump. He is a success in everything that he does. He is a positive guy. And, you know, after one of these rallies, you say to yourself, what does he do? I mean, you know, and the people in the audience, they don't go home and go to sleep. Everyone's too fired up. They love America. They love the success story. They love hearing about people who've lost everything and who are now able to go to a president who's going to make things happen, whether it's the veteran who needs medical help or the steel worker or someone who is fearful of the problems with immigration and NATO. And he's right. You know, $200 billion, nobody even talks about it. $50 billion tariff benefit right now, no one talks about it. The American people do want to hear it, and he is his best messenger.
Judge Jeanine Pirro, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, a new book by Judge Jeanine. I think it's out in the stores now.
Okay.
Great to see you, Judge. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Tucker.
I want to tell you about something else that happened today because we think it tells you a lot about where this country is moving. When you were growing up, you probably learned one of the most basic moral principles that there is. You ought to treat other people as individuals for who they are, not on the basis of how they look or who their parents are, what their parents did. You ought to judge people for what they do and what they say, for the choices they make. That was a good principle. We haven't always followed it as individuals or as a country, but we ought to try to follow it as best we can. Our hardest, because bigotry diminishes and hurts people. It's pretty simple. And yet somehow, over time, the institutional left has decided to reject that idea and embrace a standard that is both new and time-worn. You may have assumed that race guilt, collective punishment, moral purity based on bloodline, you thought those were discredited ideas, creepy relics of a darker time. It turns out they're not. It turns out the New York Times wholeheartedly embraces those ideas. So does much of the left. Yesterday, the Times announced it was hiring a woman called Sarah Jeong to write about technology for the paper. Within hours, readers discovered Jeong's Twitter feed, which she had not bothered to delete, apparently because she was not embarrassed by it. Judging by what she wrote on Twitter, Sarah Jeong is an angry bigot, and not in a subtle way. Here are some examples of her tweets. Quote, "Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old white men." Another, quote, "Dumbass effing white people marking up the internet with their opinions like dogs peeing on fire hydrants." Another, quote, "Hashtag cancel white people." At one point, Jeong tweeted a crude graph claiming that as whiteness increased, so did awful. Later, she said that white people smell like dogs. Here's another one. Quote, "White people have stopped breeding. You'll all go extinct soon. That was my plan all along." And on and on. Well, people are getting fired for far less than this across corporate America right now, but the New York Times decided to double down on Sarah Jeong's behalf. Here's part of the statement the paper sent out about her. Quote, "Jeong's journalism and the fact she is a young Asian woman have made her a subject of frequent online harassment. For a period of time, she responded to that harassment by imitating the rhetoric of her harassers." In other words, it's not her fault. White racism caused Sarah Jeong's racism against white people. She's the victim here, Harvard graduate, oppressed person that she is. Some of Jeong's many defenders in the press accused her critics of taking her tweets out of context, but that's not true. We checked. There's no context for these tweets. Sarah Jeong was furious at an entire race of people, and she said so on Twitter. You'd think somewhere on the left, the last responsible person would be cringing at all of this. It's all so ugly and awful. In an earlier time, it would be considered indefensible, but modern progressives are happy not simply to defend it, but to attack anyone who questions the joy that Sarah Jeong derives from being cruel to white men. Lydia Palgreen, the editor-in-chief of HuffPo, who is widely regarded by her peers as a moron, announced that criticism of Jeong is, quote, "part of a deeply troubling trend of far-right agitators trying to get journalists fired." Far-right agitators, okay. But actually, we're not calling on Jeong to be fired. We're not liberals, so we don't believe that every person we disagree with ought to be crushed, including Sarah Jeong. We believe in free speech, even when it's reprehensible, maybe especially when it is. What we would like to see, though, is some honesty. Let's all stop lying for a minute. What Sarah Jeong said was wrong, but it was only shocking because she expressed it so clearly. In point of fact, her views are commonplace in the American establishment, maybe universal. Try to find a single government bureaucrat or college administrator or head of corporate HR who disagrees with the idea that people should be judged by the color of their skin and that some races are more virtuous and deserving than other races. They all think that, every one of them. And yet, remarkably, these very same people are the quickest to cry racism at the slightest provocation or for no reason at all. They think of themselves as arch enemies of racism. They get tattoos on their arm telling you that, and yet they're its chief purveyors. Deep, deep irony. How do they do that? Well, simple. They redefine the term. As Vice.com succinctly put it a couple of years ago, quote, "It is literally impossible to be racist to a white person." Pretty much the entire left now takes that as a matter of faith. They deeply believe that. But what does that mean exactly? Is there really an entire race of people so repulsive, so morally repugnant that it is, quote, "literally impossible to wrong them"? You could do anything to people like that and not feel bad about it. In fact, why wouldn't you? They deserve it. They're not really human. That's the attitude. It's not hard to guess where ideas like that wind up. We've seen it. All of us should be afraid of it. All of us, regardless of color. There are plenty of examples in history of what happens when people start thinking this way. And they're all sad. It's awful. And yet this is the mindset the left has imposed on our country. It's an attitude designed to dehumanize the individual, to erase what makes each of us interesting and distinct and vital, and reduce us to faceless members of a group. It's totalitarian. We ought to resist it with everything that we have. Tammy Bruce is a radio show host in New York and a frequent guest on the show. She joins us tonight.
And bravo.
Tammy, thanks a lot for coming on.
Bravo, opening statement.
Thank you.
Brilliant, yeah.
Well, it just seems obvious. Anybody over 35 grew up learning that you ought to judge people by what they do and say and the choices they make and not by their race because they can't control their race. And yet, without the rest of us sort of acknowledging or saying anything, the left has turned that on its head, and now it is unacceptable to say that? What happened exactly?
Well, look, I think this is what the left has done wherever it has gained some sort of power around the world. It survives by dividing and conquering, right? And the New York Times, interestingly, has an editorial position that really does inflame, if you will. It's like a little cottage industry of creating kind of a racialist guide for division and resentment. You see it in their editorial pieces. You see it in the columnists as well. And this is why I think this young woman will fit right in. Now, at the same time, as you've noted, we're not looking for someone to get fired, but there is a hypocrisy here where nobody also knows what the rules are. So the rules are different for a certain group of people. They're different for people of color, perhaps, but really that's what they want you to think. The real difference here, Tucker, is progressives, right? And they're using issues of race, let's say, of sexuality, of gender, in order to create those divisions. So in this case, another woman had been hired by the New York Times last February, also a tech writer, to be on the editorial board. And she was exposed as having some tweets against, there was a slur used for African Americans and for gays. And she was immediately fired. Now, the reason was because her crime was against progressives. And the difference here is, of course, is that the presumption is, and the message to liberals is, if you are going to belong, if you're going to be correct, if you're going to be saved, you can't be with conservatives or people who are just simply not paying allegiance to the progressive end. That's what this is. Now, the danger, in a way, of what this young woman will be doing at the Times, and I think bad ideas should be out in the open so that we can confront them.
I agree.
Right?
I agree completely.
In this instance, she'll be part of the editorial board that issues editorials that are not signed. There are no bylines to the editorials, and that what they set the tone for the paper itself. So it's a harder dynamic to argue directly to someone when it is an organizational position. So this is what removes us from this. Yeah.
All right. The fact that they're teaching our children that some groups can be discriminated against, really wrong, and I think that we should call them out on it. Timmy, it is great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
British journalist Tommy Robinson spent 2 months in jail for attempting to cover a sexual abuse trial. Journalists in Great Britain and the United States applauded his sentence. Now he's finally been released from jail, and he joins us here exclusively next. The United Kingdom has become a mere shadow of the nation that gave us freedom of speech, freedom of the press, a host of other rights that we take for granted but probably should not take for granted. Nobody knows that better than Tommy Robinson. In May of this year, he was arrested for attempting to cover the trial of a sexual grooming gang in the UK. For speaking out loud on the sidewalk, he was taken to prison. With barely any time to muster a defense, he was tried and sentenced to 13 months in jail. Now, after more than 2 months behind bars in solitary confinement, during which time he was attacked by journalists in the UK. Almost nobody defended him. But tonight he has been released on bail after winning an appeal. Tommy Robinson joins us now for his first and only interview. Tommy Robinson, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. I know that you've spent the last 2.5 months by yourself in a cell, so you're probably feeling a little bit bewildered to be out. Tell us what it was like for you behind bars.
For me, behind bars, the way I was treated, I was taken to a prison with quite a low Muslim population. What I'm known for is criticising Islam, so there's been many planned attempts to murder me and kill me in this country. I was taken to a prison with a low Muslim population of 7%, where things were relatively normal. I was separated from other prisoners, but the prison officers made sure they opened my doors multiple times during the day, and they took me out to play pool and snooker with themselves. I was then taken from that prison and transferred to another prison. And I was transferred to the prison with the largest Muslim population in the UK for a CCAT prison. I was then put on solitary confinement, where I spent 2 months not seeing or speaking to anybody, and they used the reason that I was in danger. Now, they would have had risk assessments before I went there. I was purposely taken to be put in danger so that then that reason can be used to then put me on solitary confinement. And if you think about what has happened in this case, it took a number of hours to take me before a court, prosecute me, unlawfully imprison me, and then it took 2 months with the prisons moving me to prevent my legal access, shortening my legal visits, and it took months before I got the opportunity to go before a judge. Once the judge heard what had happened in the trial, we found so many illegal and wrongdoings within this kangaroo court that then it took another 2 weeks before I was freed. And to be honest, this whole encounter, if you talk about, I haven't eaten. I've lost nearly 40 pounds in prison. I had 1 tin of tuna and a piece of fruit a day. I was supposed to be in Her Majesty's prison service, not Guantanamo Bay. I couldn't open my windows because I was having excrement and spit put through them. I believe this whole process, and Tucker, this isn't the first.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who is putting excrement through your window and spit through your window?
So my prison cell that I was put in was on the lower level, the ground level, which it didn't have to be. So it's on the ground level. So every prisoner would walk past my cell window, everyone as they walk out. So when my windows were open, every prisoner's walking past. The mosque for the prison was directly opposite my cell. So every time, and we've had huge heat waves, I was literally drenched day to day, and I had excrement and spit thrown through the doors, through my windows. So in the end, I had completely blocked up windows, had to block up all of my cell windows. And all of this, when I say this, to a lot of people around the world, this current case, and the world has watched it, has shocked them. For me, this has been nothing new. There's some things I have not spoke about in the past, where in 2012, I spent 5 months on solitary confinement in the British prison. This goes against every human right and every law. I spent 5 months on solitary. When I come out, I was diagnosed with a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. I've never spoke about that publicly because I don't want to insult members of the military who have witnessed war and try and compare being locked in a cell and on solitary confinement to that. But my medical records are fully aware, that the authorities are fully aware of them, the government are fully aware of them, the prison service are fully aware of them. They know what that did to me. They know what I went through after that. They elite,
but I guess may I interrupt you? I just want our viewers to understand why this happened to you in the first place. You went to prison in a supposedly free country for expressing unfashionable opinions in public. Did you, with this last round, you've been in jail for 2 months, did you hit anybody? Did you steal anything? Or did you say something the government didn't like?
There was a court case going on where 29 people were in court for gang raping up to 100 young children. Now, I stood outside the court and I spoke, and all I done was read a BBC News article that is still online now for millions of people to see. Now, and I was taken, and everyone would have watched the video. They said for a breach of the peace. They transported me to a police custody, and then my solicitor contacted the police custody. Then they emailed my solicitor, which my solicitor has this email saying I was being released. Then they took me in a van back to the court through the back door. They put me up before a judge, and media reports have said that I pled guilty. At no point was I even asked whether I was guilty or not guilty. I was not even told, and I still, to this point now, have not been told and do not know what it is I'm deemed to have done wrong. In a British court of law, for a fair trial for anyone, they have to understand what it is they're being accused of. Contempt of court. That's all I've been told. What contempt of court? I was fully aware outside that court. I made sure to point out that these men are innocent until proven guilty. I said alleged. I was non-confrontational. There is no, the judges, and I know the law, the judges have no power to issue reporting restrictions on anybody, on any information that is already in the public domain. I was taken and whisked away, and what we've seen this week is the highest judge in our country has completely condemned this as flawed, completely criticised the handling of this case, the kangaroo court style it was to imprison me. And my biggest concern with it is, at this time, that when this has happened, and so many people, I say thank you to the Middle East Forum, a thank you to Congressman Gosar, a thank you to Ambassador Brownback, people, a thank you to yourself, Tucker, people who come out, because we know that in this country, anyone who speaks about Islam, you can believe him a complete liberal. The minute you mention, criticise Islam, you are deemed and attacked by everybody. Now, and people put their neck on the line.
Let me just ask you now, did anyone defend you? I mean, even if people disagree with you, you would think some would say he has a right, this man has a right to express his opinions. Did anybody defend your right to say what you think is true?
lined up to completely do hatchet jobs about why I should be in prison and how I deserve to be in prison. And the worst one, I'm reading a human rights lawyer defending why I should be in prison. Now, I'm in prison. I'm facing absolute. Yep. They know what they're doing to me. They know. At the time when I was in prison, they then come and see me in my prison cell and say, "Police are on their way to your house because there's intel. There's going to be acid attacks against your wife." Now,
I'm sorry, Tommy. We're out of time, okay. And on that sad note, I wish you good luck in recovering from this and on the time you're going to take off. And I just want our viewers to understand that this has happened in a country that we believed was free, and without our vigilance, it could happen here. That's not hysteria. It's real. Tommy Robinson, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Manafort's trial just wrapped up its third day. The government revealed more of its case for putting Manafort in prison for more than 30 years for a crime that usually draws a sentence of 1 year and 3 months. We've got more on that coming up. Well, the trial of former Donald Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort completed its third day today. Prosecutors brought out evidence that Manafort lived a luxurious lifestyle, bought suits they suggested were too expensive for one man to buy, maintained overseas accounts, and then lied about his income on loan applications. This was all to bolster their case that Paul Manafort deserves more prison time than most murderers. More than once during the trial, the judge, T.S. Ellis III, blasted prosecutors for simply shaming Manafort without offering any actual evidence of criminal behavior. Joe DeGeneva is a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and he joins us tonight. Joe, thanks a lot for coming on. I never thought that I would defend Paul Manafort, who I've always thought was a little on the sleazy side, but I think it's worth defending the principle of evenly and fairly applied justice. And it's not a crime to buy expensive suits. And you shouldn't get 300 years in prison for tax evasion, right?
You're absolutely right, Tucker. What you are watching is what is called in the Justice Department an in terrorem prosecution, the use of terror legal tactics to destroy a human being, to try and force him to cooperate when he has nothing to cooperate with. And what the special counsel has done, Mr. Mueller, is he has chosen his Jack the Ripper-like leader, Andrew Weissman, to use the type of tactics that are properly reserved for mafia gangs, for terrorists, and they have converted Paul Manafort into this ugly creature. This is one of the most unfortunate moments in the history of the FBI and the Department of Justice. This case is the Rosemary's Baby of Rod Rosenstein, who forced this prosecution, permitted the abusive tactics which occurred during the investigation and which are occurring in this trial, agreed to by the FBI Director Chris Wray, and of course, the Attorney General is asleep, somnambulant, as this horrific embarrassment to the department continues in the Eastern District of Virginia. This is a disgusting display of prosecutorial abuse for which the Attorney General and his deputy should be ashamed.
Is there anybody that you know personally who'd with a straight face say, yeah, 305 years in prison seems like an appropriate punishment for tax evasion? Is there anybody who would say that? No is the answer. So how can they charge him with crimes that sentences so clearly disproportionate to the crime?
Because the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein, has given Mr. Mueller full authority to do whatever he wants. And because the ultimate goal here is to, quote, get something on President Trump, they've decided to ruin Paul Manafort, who has no criminal record, whatever you may think of his political leanings and his tactics over the years, or who his overseas clients were. He does not deserve this. The Attorney General knows that. The Deputy Attorney General knows that. But you know what? They don't care, because they know that Mueller wants to get Trump. That's what this is about. There's nothing for Manafort to flip on, for heaven's sakes. So what you are watching is a bizarre mistreatment of a human being. This is a case that should get 1 to 3 years at most. But Mueller and Weissman and all the people in the department just can't give it up. 1.3
years, 1 year and 3 months, rather. That's the average sentence for tax fraud in this country. It's unbelievable. Joe DeGenova, thank you for that perspective. This is your world, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, while President Trump was in Helsinki, former President Obama went to Johannesburg, South Africa, and gave a speech. The parts of the speech people noticed were the ones where he attacked President Trump. But he said something almost unbelievable in another part of the speech that nobody caught. We did. We'll tell you what it is when we come back.